Depending on where you've gone and where you've been, it may be mid-Christmas season for you. It may be early Advent. You may already have actually been in stores just enough that you're tired of Christmas. Good luck, because there's a ways to go yet. It used to really bug me when I was a kid, and they would have the Santa Claus parade in Toronto the last Saturday of November. And I used to think, boy, that's early. Santa Claus would arrive at Eaton's in Toronto. That's how old I am. I do remember Eaton's. And I remember thinking, this is just so early in the year. That was the last Saturday of November. I share that way because, according to CBC News, Santa Claus actually arrived in downtown Toronto about half an hour ago. They've moved the parade even a week earlier than it used to be. Now, when I was in seminary, I remember thinking about this and having a conversation with some folks, and we were bemoaning the fact that because they were having this darn parade so early, they were actually starting the Advent Christmas season before we were done with the old one. Before we were done with the old liturgical year. Advent starts a new year, and we hadn't even finished the old year yet. And so I'm thinking to myself this morning, wow, Santa Claus has arrived in Toronto, and then we're going to go and read a passage about the end of Jesus' life. That just feels a little weird. But I'm not going to apologize for us celebrating Reign of Christ Sunday today. I'm just going to wonder about the need to, rush the other stuff so quickly. This is Reign of Christ Sunday. This is the last day of the church year. I like the fact that we start the year a little differently than the rest of the world. Every calendar that you buy will tell you that the year begins on the 1st of January, but not so for us. It starts next Sunday. I like the fact that our year starts a little bit off of the sort of regular year. Just a reminder to us that when we're following Christ, we're going to a little bit of a different rhythm. Our life, our world, the way we do things just goes at a little bit different pace. And I like that reminder. This day, Reign of Christ, used to be called Christ the King. It still is in certain denominations. It's an odd day, really, because it's the newest, or one of the newest, not quite the newest, because we've added Season of Creation and a few other things, but it's one of the newest days in the church year. It came along in the 1920s for very blatantly political reasons, which is kind of intriguing. Came along because the Roman Catholic Church wanted a day for people to realize, A, Jesus was king, and thus, by extension, nobody else was. Most specifically, as it was declared in creating this day, communism was not king. That piece has sort of gotten dropped off the day, but the day actually came under the calendar as a way to sort of remind the world shortly after the Russian Revolution, communism was not king, Jesus was, which is theologically an interesting piece by and of itself. But I'm not going to go there. It's just kind of an interesting setting for the year, for the day that in less than 100 years we've turned into a day for really focusing not on Jesus as a king, but on what it means that he's reigning, that we live in the realm of Christ, if you will, that we live in a world where we're hopefully trying to take the teachings of Jesus a little more to heart and to let them change us and hopefully, by extension, our world, even if just a little bit. So we read this passage that comes from the end of Jesus' earthly life. We read the story of Jesus being nailed to the cross according to the Gospel of Luke. And it's kind of neat because there are a couple of pieces in Luke's Gospel that we don't get anywhere else. And I want to talk briefly about those two this morning. One of them is that wonderful, wonderful line where Jesus says, God, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Such a neat line. For many people of all the various, quote, last words, unquote, of Jesus, this is one of the lines that is most familiar, that is really most powerful. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Thus, it's always a little bit difficult to recognize that it doesn't appear in the oldest manuscripts of the New Testament. Scholars really struggle with that because it's such a powerful piece. But in the oldest, most accurate manuscripts, it's not there. Even so, most scholars think that it belongs. I kind of like that, and I let the scholars make their decisions, and I just decide to go kind of with a majority of them and hope for the best. But an awful lot of scholars think that this is so fitting with the picture of Jesus that Luke has given us that even though the words aren't there in some of the ancient manuscripts, they actually believe that probably they were. They got taken out and then put back in. It's their way of saying that the essence of Jesus fits so well with that instruction, with that request of Jesus saying to God, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. This is Jesus at the moment at which he is being nailed to a cross. That's not a pleasant undertaking, let's be honest. And yet at that moment, Jesus says, it's okay. Forgive them. It's Luke wanting us to realize that even up till that moment, Jesus' concern is still for other people. Jesus' concern is that others be forgiven and brought in. Now, there are few topics harder to deal with than forgiveness. I find, and this is not a scientific survey by any stretch of the imagination, but I find that when you talk about the biblical call to forgiveness, people are real quick to come up with reasons as to why they can't do that. Right? I mean, people will do that when you talk about things such as giving away all your money to the poor. That's never a terrifically popular notion. But when you talk about the need for forgiveness, people are very quick to say, yes, well, in some circumstances, you can't really do that. Or the classic one that I've heard so many times, it just kind of bounces off, well, you can't forgive Hitler, can you? Occasionally they'll put other names in there, but usually it's something as extreme as that, as if somehow finding one exception to the command to forgive means we don't ever have to do it. I don't think that's the case. I think God knows, we all know how incredibly, insanely difficult it is sometimes to forgive, and there are times that we can't do it. That's okay. We're not, nobody's keeping a scorecard. But the hope, the dream, is that we can find ways to do that and explore ways to do that. That we can at the very least ask ourselves the question, if I forgive this person, what might happen? Or conversely, if I don't, what might happen? Because when we don't forgive, it's usually us who suffer. Far more than somebody else. We think, I'm never going to forgive you because I'm really ticked off at you. We carry that burden around, and it bothers us. So this is a strong instruction that Jesus gives, one of the very last things he says, according to Luke. There's one more piece that, again, is pretty unique to Luke. Matthew and Mark tell us that both the criminals on the crosses beside Jesus deride him. That both of them say, in essence, okay, Buster, if you're so hot, get us out of here now. I totally understand that. It's like those scenes that you get in movies, usually in animated films, because it's much easier to do it in animation than in real life, but where people are in an absolutely horrendous situation that they cannot get out of, and then somehow magically something works and they escape just at that last moment before the fierce blades or the bomb or the whatever is going to happen. These guys are feeling like they're in that moment. They are dying. They're literally dying. So I understand them rather frantically wanting to get out of that situation. And that's what Matthew and Mark give us. Luke, however, gives us this little conversation where one of the fellows on the cross says, okay, Jesus, if you're so good, get us out of here now. To which the other one says, why don't you shut up? We deserve this. He doesn't. And then Jesus does something amazing. The fellow looks at him and says, Jesus, would you remember me? Would you remember me? And Jesus says, yes. Yes, today you'll be with me in paradise. I think Luke has a very specific reason for wanting us to read that, to hear that, to absorb that. And I think it has to do with the very reason why Jesus came, and I think it has to do with the very reason why Jesus died. I believe, and this passage in Luke and others back it up, I believe that Jesus came to show us God's love and forgiveness no matter what. I believe that Jesus came to show us that nothing we could do would ever stop Jesus from doing that. And here we see that. Even as he is dying, still he is reaching out to welcome an outsider into the realm of God. Here in this moment of death, Jesus reaches out to somebody who's been convicted of a capital crime. This is not some nice person. This is somebody who, by his own admission, says, I deserve to die for the crimes that I've done. And Jesus says, God still loves you. You will be with me in paradise. This is the line with which we end the church year. Next week, we move into a new one and go through a cycle yet again of looking at all sorts of aspects of Jesus' life. We end this last year with this notion that no matter what, no matter when, Jesus will stop at nothing to say to each one of us and to others besides, we will be with him in paradise, even today. Thanks be to God.